Hi, I'm Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, which, as you can tell, is all over the place. What is the significance of that? You know, it's so interesting. I mentioned that last week that, you know, since I tend to speak about the parasha, we have a little bit of a conundrum in these weeks, right up until Matos Maseh, until the first week in August, because Israel and America is out of sync. And I said at the time that I really don't know why. I asked a few people and nobody knew why. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but that doesn't really constitute what we would call as serious research. I have a few go-to people and I asked them and nobody had an answer for me yet. But of course, my listeners out there, evidently, I don't know. It could be they just knew this, and it could be that they just did a Google search. I don't know which one. But two separate listeners sent me to an article on the OU website by Jack Abramowitz, who happens to be an old friend of mine. In fact, I once wrote a haskama, an approbation, for his book, the God Book, and he wrote a whole article on this. And I would suggest that you actually go there and read it to get all of the technicalities. You can see the link at the bottom of the page. And I mean, basically, I'll sum it up for those of you who really don't have enough motivation to actually go and read an article, which is why I guess you watch this podcast. Because I don't have the patience to write an article, so it works out well, yeah? Basically, he makes a couple of points. One is that there are certain parashas that have to be doubled up, but the default parasha that gets doubled is Matos Maseh. And so unless there is one of the extenuating reasons that you can read the article to see what these are, we always double up Matos Maseh. This is going to cause problems for people who travel between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Well, newsflash, that didn't really go on for thousands of years. People basically stayed here. Yeah, if you wanted to go to America for years, you took a boat. Planes are a relatively recent invention. The Wright brothers, both of whom wives were very happy because they finally found Mr. Wright. Anyway, they invented it in Kitty Hawk at the turn of the century, I know someone's going to write me in, but it doesn't make a difference, whatever it was. And they so until then, you had to take a boat. It took a long time to get back and forth. It wasn't a common travel. So therefore, the fact that the parashas were a little out of sync for certain years at certain times didn't really bother the people who were setting up the calendar, because that was such an unusual situation. Today, the unusual has become the usual. And that's why when you see the chagim and the seasons and how everything goes, it did not take into account the fact that there were going to be Jews living in Australia and South Africa and New Zealand and Chile and all the way down towards the bottom of the earth where the seasons are backwards. And people stand upside down because they're at the bottom of the earth, and the blood goes to their head. So we didn't take that into account. Yeah, that wasn't one of the things. My brother-in-law, David Lichtman, was a Rav in Calgary, Canada, and he had to do a bris somewhere in northern Canada in the summertime. And there was some Jew who was working up there because of the oil business. And he flew up, and it was a Shabbos bris, but there's no sunset because it's so far north in the summer. It's always daylight. So I said, so what do? He says, well, you go down until you hit a Jewish community, and you go by whatever time they do it. So obviously, Jews were not meant to be living at the North Pole or the South Pole. V'haraya, you know who lives at the North Pole. Yeah, so enough said. In any event, the point that I wanted to make from this is that I probably could have just as easily done a Google search and gotten the answer to this question. I just, when people think that I'm joking, that I don't really prepare, and I'm just, doing a stream of consciousness kind of a thing here on my podcast, I hope this proves it. Yeah, I just happen to be talking about it, and I didn't do any research, and Baruch Hashem, my listeners out there, the people who write me to tell me when I make a mistake about great adventure or great adventures, the people who tell me when I make a difference between Cracker Jacks and Cracker Jack, Baruch Hashem, I have people out there who are literate and motivated and provide me with the correct information. So that brings me to this week, because nonetheless, although somebody had a suggestion of how I could do the parsha so that it made sense for everybody, I like to talk about a parsha, it's the same parsha for everyone. And like I say, this week we're a little off, because in Chutz La'aretz they're going to read Emor, and in Eretz Yisrael we're going to read Bahar. So what could I speak about? Well, I could speak about the fact that this past week and this week is going to be Bahab. Yeah, which just brings such happiness and glee to yeshiva students all around the world. I was in Chutz La'aretz for Bahab. It is not easy to find a minyan that says Slichos on Bahab. This was somewhat difficult. Bahab is, of course, an acronym for Beis Hey Beis, which stands for Beis, the second day of the week, Hey, the fifth day of the week, and Beis, the second day of the week. So it goes Monday, Thursday, Monday, and there's special slichos that are said. This is in ER because of Pesach, and it's in Cheshvan because of Sukkot, and it's a time to reflect on the fact that sometimes because of the simcha of the Yontif, we get a little carried away, it's Kalos Rosh, and so we have to do tshuva. I was once in a yeshiva where somebody made a miscalculation and they started on Thursday. We did a haba haba. Haba haba. Anyway, so I could talk about that. I could talk about what's this week that I think is such an important event, and that is, of course, it's Victoria Day. Canada has a holiday called Victoria Day. I was originally just going to say I have no idea what this is about, but then I knew I'd get a whole bunch of emails. So I actually broke down and looked it up. And Victoria Day is a day that is celebrated in Canada, remembering the birthday of Queen Victoria. Yep, that's it. It's called Victoria Day. And we all remember Queen Victoria. And I know how meaningful that is for everybody here. I don't know if I told this story. I was learning by Rabbi Orlofsky, and a friend of mine was learning Musa Seder with him. Rabbi Orlofsky is one of the senior Rosh Yeshiva of our generation here. Certainly, he's here in Eretz Yisrael. He's American, English, Israeli. He's outside of time and space. Anyway, so this fellow was learning Musa with him, and I don't know which sefer it was, but it said a person who does this will lose their head. And he said, I was thinking to myself, that line from Alice in Wonderland, where the Queen of Hearts says, off with her, off with his head, off with his head. And I had that in my head, off with his head. And just then, Reb Tzvi goes, off with his head. Now, Reb Tzvi is very well knowledgeable in all areas of life. But my friend was taken back slightly, just like somebody was once in a shir and everybody was ganging up on him against his pshad, and then somebody else turned against him and he said, "Et tu, Brute," which is in fact from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. But so he says, off with his head. So my friend says, I did a double take. So he looks at me and he says, do you know where that's from? He says, I know where that's from. How do you know where that's from? So he said, it's based on Queen Victoria, the Queen of Hearts, when he wrote it. So I said to my friend, how could that be? She didn't have the ability to cut off people's heads back then. He said, I asked that kasha. I said to Reb Tzvi, how can it be Queen Victoria? She couldn't cut off anybody's head. And he said, Afal Pikain. That was one of her favorite expressions. When she'd get upset at somebody, she'd say, off with his head, off with his head. And so he looked at me and he said, not only did he know as much about the secular world as me, but he had a chiddush to say about it. Anyway, so those of you in Canada, happy Victoria Day. And I'm sure we will all take a little time to think about Queen Victoria and, of course, her Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. His famous quote when he was attacked with an anti-Semitic response in Parliament, responded, when your ancestors were pig herders, mine was serving as priests in the Temple of Solomon. Considering the fact that he became an apostate, that's not doesn't tell you that much, but you wanna have a certain level of at least understanding, where the Yidden come from. And in any event, that's Victoria Day, but that's not really what I want to talk about. I thought it might be fascinating to talk about Queen Victoria, but that's not. As I mentioned, this shir is all over the place. So what are we going to talk about? There are 2 events on the Jewish calendar, regardless of which parsha you lane this coming Shabbos. There are 2 events that take place. This podcast usually comes out on Motzi Shabbos, so if you're watching it right away, before it has a chance to ferment, you're getting it fresh right off the internet, or you can get this shirim on a phone service. Somebody called me up and asked me, where do you dial? And I don't know. I'm going to ask my producer to put in a link. So somebody wanted to call up. They don't have the internet. Yeah. I personally have an Arab that I know who has the internet, and I have him look these things up for me and tell me. And he was surprised. You don't know Victoria Day? But in any event, so if you're getting it right away, so if you're watching it on TorahAnytime or wherever you are listening to your podcast, and I have to mention that this podcast number 36 is sponsored anonymously by a fellow who just wanted to see this podcast supported. He said he listens to it at work. He says, thank you for turning my work into a base medrash. I feel that way often about my base medrash, that I turn it into work. But anyway, so thank you for your anonymous support and the schus of the thousands and thousands of people who are listening. I mentioned this the last time, that some of our podcasts are over 10,000 listeners. It could be more than that. I don't know, because there are people who send it around, and sometimes there are groups of people gathering together to watch it, and as an event, as a family, as friends, communities, whole communities gather together and watch this on a big screen. I don't really know if that's true. But anyway, so this is number 36. We want to thank our sponsors. And so whether you're watching on TorahAnytime, or wherever you watch or listen to podcasts, or just listen on the phone, or wherever you are, we're happy to have you aboard and along for the experience. So you know that this Sunday is Pesach Sheni. It's like Pesach, only a little different. And in the same week is Lag Ba'omer. Lag Ba'omer, which is such a special holiday, where those in Eretz Yisrael, we build bonfires, and we sing that beautiful song, Bar Yochai, la 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 la, Bar Yochai, la 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 la. There are also other words, but they're all in Aramaic and nobody really knows them. So, but everyone knows how to go, Bar Yochai, la 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 la. My kids, we went to America one summer, and the song had just come out, so I guess you can time this accordingly. Yeah. The song had come out, Yerushalayim, Mordechai David. Hey, Yerushalayim. So we were in a van, these 15-passenger vans with our family, traveling around wherever we were going in the United States, and my kids spent that entire summer trying to teach me the lyrics to that song. And I can tell you now, looking back, they were completely unsuccessful. All I know how to go is, what can I do? A lot of those kind of lyrics, which is strange. I think it's specifically in Hebrew that I have that problem. I can remember a tremendous amount of words to songs in English. For example, the Pirates of Penzance, the Major General song. I am the very model of a modern Major General. I have information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England, and I quote the fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo and orders categorical. I'm very well acquainted to it matters mathematical. I understand equations both the simple and quadratical. Above binomial theorem, I'm teeming with a lot of news. With many interesting facts about the square, I have the hypotenuse with interesting facts of the square. Now that's impressive, and that is impressive as the Tom Lehrer version with the names of the chemical elements. There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen, and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and amerithium, ruthenium, uranium, europium, zirconium, deuterium, vanadium, and you get the idea. And yet, I have to check for Bris Shmei in the Siddur. I have to check for Modem de Rabbanan. I forget it. So I don't know. It could be my dyslexia. I can't remember things in Hebrew. I don't know. It becomes much more difficult. But so there's Lag Ba'omer. And the two of them come out in the same week. Coincidence? I think not. Because as we mentioned last week, each one of the weeks of Sfiras HaOmer correspond to one of the spheres. And we'll have to speak about the spheres. I don't know if we'll have time for it today, but we'll definitely have to speak about the spheres. And it goes Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. And on each one of those weeks, we access the other spheres together with it. So you have on the first day Gvura, you have Chesed Shebegvura. The next day you have Gvura Shebegvura. So you get the idea. And you keep adding in all the ones. Interestingly enough, Pesach Sheni comes out in the week of Hod on the first day, which is Chesed Shebahod. And Lag Ba'omer comes out on Hod Shebahod. Now, there's an integral relationship between Hod and Chesed. The spheres come in sets of three. That's why when the Arizal sets up his Seder plate like a Magen David, the Magen David is like 3 and 3, a triangle and a triangle. Because there is Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, which is the balance between the two. That's the facing up triangle. And the facing down triangle is Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, which brings them together. Those are those 6. Malchus is the little hexagon in the middle that brings it all together. Now, Chesed is obviously Chesed, giving. Gvura is pulling back. It's control. It's stopping. Yeah? Shakai sha'amar dai. Chesed is a beautiful thing. Rain. Rain is nice. Too much rain makes a mabul. That's too much. So you need to pull back. Too much pulling back, you're left with nothing. And that's why the generation which was, so to speak, a perversion of Chesed, the Dor Mabul, they were destroyed by a overwhelming amount of Chesed. The generation that was complete holding back, which was Stom, that if you tried to help somebody that was punishable by death, they were destroyed by Aish, which reduced them to nothing, ashes. You need to create a balance between Chesed and Gvura. And if you have only Chesed or you have only Gvura, you don't have function. The balance between those two are Tiferes, where there's a giving and a holding back. And by the way, that is essential to all of Judaism. We had it in Pirkei Avos, those who are learning Pirkei Avos during these weeks. Warm yourself by the hot coals of the sages, but don't get so close that you burn yourself. Yeah, you have to come close, but not too close. There's a balance between that Chesed and Gvura. And that's the upper part. Netzach and Hod is a lower part of that. And there's many ways to understand it. But Netzach is to be Natseach, to be victorious, to win. Now, in order for someone to win, someone has to lose. Losing sounds bad. But let's say we're having a Milchamas HaTorah, where we're arguing and learning. And I have my point of view and you have your point of view. We spoke about this a few podcasts ago with the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. And I'm engaging you and I want to get you to understand. At some point, you're going to be modeh to me, Hod. One is Netzach and one is Hod. That's the balance between those two. Interesting that the spheres are represented by historical characters. Netzach is Moshe. Moshe fights. Moshe fights with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe fights with everybody. He stands up and fights. He had a little difficulty speaking. Hence the expression, walk softly and carry a big stick. Yeah? Started with Moshe Rabbeinu. They think it was Teddy Roosevelt. No, it goes all the way back. Yeah? Netzach. Aaron is Hod. He admits. Yeah. He's Maida. Because he's not a Bar Hachi. He doesn't get involved. Korach stands up and says, I should be the Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu says, how dare you rebel against God? And the two of them have it out in this dramatic confrontation. And what did Aaron say? Nothing. He had nothing to say. You want to? Okay. You don't want to? No, I'll be the Kohen Gadol. I won't be the Kohen. I'm okay. Hod. It's translated as splendor, which doesn't do anything for me, except that I know that it's an artificial sweetener. So that's the best I can tell you about that. I don't know what the word splendor is supposed to indicate in the sense of Hod. But Hod is a sense of a certain admittance. Yeah, to recognize. Hod is an interesting week. Because if somebody's menatzeach, then somebody has to be moideh. Somebody has to realize that I didn't win, that I lost. I don't like to bring in pop culture references, but there is a film that's current right now that's making billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. And that's a lot of money for a movie. And the movie is a sequel to another movie that also made, and then billions of dollars. And in that one, everybody loses. This one, everybody wins. That's it. You're either going to win or you're going to lose. That's it. There's only two possibilities here, yeah? And so sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But losing doesn't actually mean losing. It means that life presents us with challenges. And things don't always go our way. And we all know this. We all know this. It would be so nice. I don't know. Does anybody else do this? I do this. This is a absolutely worthless thing that I do in my spare time, which I have quite a lot of now, since I've retired and I'm living off of my past accomplishments. And, when they introduce me someplace, they say, the former director, the former mashgiach, the former. After a while they say, what does he do now? Nothing. They introduced me as world famous speaker, which is another way of saying a man with no job. That's what my thing is. They say, you want to come and speak? Sure, I got nothing else to do. Yeah. One of the worthless things that I do when I have spare time is I go back to a point in my life and I say, what if I did this differently? What if I made a different decision? What if I made a different statement? Yeah. And you play that over in your head. Now, sometimes, it's filmed and it's on the internet. There's no way to ever get it off, and you said some things, you did some things, and that's it. There's no way to get it off. It's there forever. And the truth is, when we say in Pirkei Avos, that everything that we say is written down in a book. We just don't always perceive it, but everything is remembered, yeah. So we have challenges that come our way, and things that come our way, and it doesn't always work out. I used to write a column in Chinuch and HaModia, and one of the columns I wrote about was, I understand there are people who've had children with a lot of serious problems, and they have to live with these problems a long time. Mine is very minor by comparison. But I had, Kanai 9 kids, and most of it, you know how it goes. You go to the hospital, eventually you give birth, and then they set you up somewhere in the hallway with a little screen separating you from the people walking by. That's what they do in Israel. I don't know how it works in Chutzlars. But, and you get your baby and you stay there and long enough until they decide that they're sick of you, and then they send you on your way and you go home. And, that's how it goes. If you have enough kids, you get to go to the new mother halfway house, Berech Lama, where you are surrounded by other women who've just given birth and are as cranky and irritable as you are, with a bunch of screaming babies. And but at least you don't have to take care of them. There's a nursery. Unless you have a particularly difficult child and they keep calling you to come and take the kid, in which case I don't know what you're doing there in the first place. But they do prepare your meals for you, and you get to have a roommate, and it's very exciting. So there were times I said my wife, and she's like, "Can I come home now?" He said, No, you need to rest. I'm not resting. Can I come home? It was interesting. I didn't know they have a Berech Lama, not only for new mothers. I only knew about the ones for new mothers, but after I had my heart attack, so the Kupa lets you go to a Berech Lama. I'm looking at the brochures. Some of these are very nice. I expect to end up in one of them eventually. I've taught over the years for Rabbi Center, and after I had my heart attack, he didn't know if I was going to go to a Berech Lama or not. He said to me, I will personally pay to send you to the Ramada to have a room, and I'll hire somebody there to take care of you so that you can rest up after your heart attack and bypass operation. And that was very touching. And my wife felt that it would be better for the family if I came home and, achieve some level of normalcy. So I came in very slowly. I'd gone through a major operation. And right away I did sponge it. I'm just kidding. But, you get to rest up, and that's the way it works. You know how it's supposed to work. You go to the hospital, you have the baby, you come home, you go to the Berech Lama, you don't go to the Berech Lama, dress him up in his little stretchies, with his little tiny newborn diapers, and that's what happens. Anyway, I had one kid was born, and they took the baby away, and we waited for the baby to come back, and they didn't bring him back. Now, after a while, you're like, I could have sworn we had a baby here. They said, yeah, he was born in meconium. It got into his lungs, and he's going to the Bagia, and he's going to be there for a couple of weeks. And we were shocked. That's not the way it's supposed to go. Supposed to give us the baby, we nurse the baby, we take the baby home, What is this? My wife went home, and she'd come every day, see him sitting in the little glass box. And my wife said to me, "He looks sad." I said, "He looks annoyed." He is, after all, an Orlofsky. What am I doing over here? This is not the way it's supposed to go. That's how it works. So, in the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu says, we're going to have a Pesach. The only Pesach in the Midbar. This was the only time they celebrated Pesach in the Midbar. And everyone's going to bring a Korban Pesach. We're going to eat the Korban Pesach. We're going to have a Seder. Seder in the desert. Yeah. And could be there were craters. They had a Seder in the crater. See you later at the Seder. Anyway, so some people came and they were like, we're tummy. What do we do? we can't bring the Korban Pesach. And Moshe says, yeah, that's correct. You're Tamei, and you can't bring the Korban Pesach. What's the problem here? We want to bring the Korban Pesach. Why should we get left out? Not our fault. Moshe says, well, let me talk to God. And God says, yeah, give him another shot. And so in Iyar, we have Pesach Sheni. It's another Pesach for the people who missed the first Pesach. And they can now go bring a Korban Pesach and go and eat it and have another shot at an opportunity that they lost. There's another holiday. Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 Talmidim. I cannot even begin to fathom what that means. I always give the observation, I remember in the 1980s, when in a few months, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and the Stipler were all nifter. And we were reeling. That's 3. Imagine 600-700 a day, day after day, week after week. And Rabbi Akiva is watching his life's work turn to ashes in front of his eyes. And after he lost everything, could you blame him if he gave up? I wouldn't blame him. Decided to sit at home. Remember the glory days. Remember what was. And Rabbi Akiva started over. He picked himself up and he started over. There were people who survived the Holocaust, who had businesses, who had factories, who had lives, who had families, who had children, and they lost everything. They came to America with nothing. And they picked themselves up and they started over again. And they built new families, and they built Torah institutions, and they built new businesses. That's Lag Ba'omer. That's Pesach Sheni. It's a time when we can pick ourselves up and start over again. Those times when we look back at life and we say, I wish I could go back and do it over again. That's Hod. Hod is a time when we say, okay, I admit, I'm Tamei. I admit, I lost everything. What do I do? This is a week of second chances. This is a week to start over. For those of us who may not have maximized these past weeks, to now focus ourselves and to accomplish. It's not too late. Where there's life, there's hope. I was teaching in the introductory program in Or Sameach, which is essentially for collegiate students. And this fellow walked in who seemed like he was older than the average student. And I said, can I help you, sir? He says, I'm joining the intro program. And I did a double take. And he says, Rabbi, I'm 82 years old. If not now, when? That was a good answer. It was a good answer. If not now, when? Im lo yachshav emosai, as we say in Pirkei Avos. Now is the time. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Yesterday is a canceled check. Tomorrow is a promissory note. All you have is today. Spend it. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. All you have is today, and that is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So let's use this week of Hod, this special power of being able to start again, start anew, to be able to take advantage of Pesach Sheni and take advantage of Lag Ba'omer and take advantage of the Sfiras HaOmer to build ourselves up to the people that we're meant to be. And that's it for this podcast. If you would like to find out more about the podcast, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast. If you would like to make a comment on this particular podcast, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast/36. If you'd like to find out about any other upcoming events, as I mentioned, I'm going to be in the United States after the week after Shavuos, the last 2 weeks of June. So you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/events. If you would like to contact me, RabbiOrlofsky.com/contact. And if you would like to sponsor an episode, we are sponsored through Shavuos, so we're always happy to accommodate you. Yeah? So go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast and click on the sponsor an episode button. I am David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.